"If you last more than a minute in that saddle, I'll marry you," Red Cloud declared, her voice cutting through the dusty air of Dusty Ridge as she pointed toward the wild bronco snorting and pawing at the ground, her dark eyes blazing with defiance as the crowd of onlookers fell silent. Jack Monroe stepped forward with a slow, confident grin, his calloused hands reaching up to deliberately unbutton his vest and let it fall to the dirt, revealing the lean muscles and old scars beneath his white cotton shirt as he never broke eye contact with her, whispering low enough for only her to hear. "Then I reckon I better make every second count, beautiful." But beneath Red Cloud's bold challenge lay a desperate gamble. Her Apache elders had given her until the harvest moon to choose a husband or face exile from her tribe, while Jack carried bounty hunters on his trail who would surely catch up if he stayed in any town longer than a few days. As Jack approached the snorting beast and the townspeople pressed closer, placing their bets and shouting encouragement, one burning question hung in the desert air like the promise of a storm. Would 60 seconds be enough time to seal both their fates, or would it destroy everything they were trying to protect? The dust swirled around Dusty Ridge's main street as townsfolk gathered for the annual endurance contest. Red Cloud stood with her arms crossed, watching the newcomer Cowboy swagger toward the makeshift arena. Jack Monroe had arrived 3 days ago with nothing but attitude and a worn leather saddle. The Apache woman had heard enough of his boasting at the saloon. Every night he regaled listeners with tales of horses he'd broken and women he'd charmed. His cocky grin never left his face, even when the other cowboys challenged his stories. Red Cloud stepped into the circle. The crowd quieted. She pointed at the snorting bronco tied to the hitching post. "You talk big about riding," she said, her voice steady and clear. "Prove it." Jack's eyebrows raised. He tilted his hat back and studied her face. "What's the wager?" he asked. Red Cloud's heart pounded, but she kept her expression fierce. The tribal elders had been pressuring her for months, marriage or exile. Those were her choices. This arrogant cowboy might solve her problem if he failed. "If you last more than a minute in that saddle, I'll marry you." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Jack's friend Gus nearly choked on his tobacco. The local women whispered behind their hands. Jack stepped closer, his blue eyes locked onto hers. Something flickered there beyond the usual arrogance. Curiosity, maybe, or hunger. "And if I don't last?" he asked. "Then you leave town tonight." The bronco kicked at the dirt. Its wild eyes rolled white. 3 cowboys had already tried to break this horse. All 3 had lasted less than 30 seconds. Jack nodded slowly. He began unbuttoning his vest. "Deal," he said. The crowd pressed closer. Bets flew back and forth. Red Cloud watched Jack's hands move with practiced ease. She wondered if she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life. The morning sun cast long shadows across Dusty Ridge as word of the challenge spread like wildfire. Red Cloud sat on her horse at the edge of town, watching the preparations below. The contest wouldn't begin until noon, but already people were setting up viewing areas and taking bets. Her brother Running Wolf rode up beside her. His face showed the same concern it had worn since their father's death 2 winters ago. "This is foolish, sister," he said. "You don't know anything about this man." Red Cloud kept her eyes on the town. Jack Monroe was visible near the corral, examining the bronco with careful attention. His movements were different now, less showmanship, more focus. "I know enough," she replied. "He's arrogant. He'll fail." "And if he doesn't?" The question hung between them like smoke from a dying fire. Red Cloud had spent the entire night asking herself the same thing. Marriage to a stranger seemed preferable to exile, but barely. Running Wolf's horse shifted restlessly. "The elders are talking. They say your challenge shows disrespect for our ways. Our ways would force me to marry Gray Fox." Her brother fell silent. Gray Fox was twice her age and already had 2 wives. The tribal council had suggested the match 3 times. Each time Red Cloud had found excuses to delay. "At least Gray Fox is Apache," Running Wolf said finally. Red Cloud turned to face him. "At least Jack Monroe hasn't tried to buy me with horses and blankets." They rode back toward town in uncomfortable silence. The main street buzzed with activity. Cowboys from neighboring ranches had arrived to watch. Even some of the town's more respectable women had found reasons to venture outside. Jack stood near the saloon, surrounded by a small crowd. His friend Gus was shaking his head and gesturing wildly. Red Cloud caught fragments of their conversation as she dismounted. "You don't understand what you're getting into," Gus was saying. "Marriage ain't something you can just walk away from." Jack's response was too quiet to hear, but his expression remained calm. He caught sight of Red Cloud and touched the brim of his hat. The gesture was respectful, almost formal, nothing like his usual swagger. Martha Henderson, the preacher's wife, approached Red Cloud with pursed lips and worried eyes. "Dear, surely you don't mean to go through with this spectacle," she said. "Think of your reputation." Red Cloud almost laughed. Her reputation among the white townspeople had never concerned her before. They tolerated her presence because she traded fairly and caused no trouble. Marriage to one of their own might actually improve her standing. "The challenge stands, Mrs. Henderson. But you barely know the man. He could be a criminal, or worse." The words struck closer to home than Red Cloud wanted to admit. Jack Monroe had appeared in Dusty Ridge without explanation. No one knew where he'd come from or why he'd chosen their small town. Most drifters moved on after a few days. Jack had lingered. She watched him now, noting the careful way he avoided certain questions from the crowd. His clothes were well made but worn. His boots showed hard travel. The gun on his hip was clean and well maintained, but the holster bore old scratches. Sheriff Collins emerged from his office and walked toward the growing crowd. Red Cloud tensed. Collins was fair but cautious. If he had concerns about Jack, he might try to stop the contest. The sheriff approached Jack directly. Their conversation was brief and conducted in low voices. Red Cloud saw Jack's jaw tighten slightly, but he nodded at whatever Collins said. Old Pete, who ran the general store, hobbled over to Red Cloud's side. "That bronco killed a man 2 years back," he said conversationally. "Threw him into the corral fence, broke his neck clean through." Red Cloud kept her expression neutral. Jack Monroe chose to accept the challenge. Mighty confident for a stranger. The comment echoed her own thoughts. Most sensible men would have laughed off her challenge or tried to negotiate different terms. Jack had accepted immediately, as if he'd been expecting something like this. The sun climbed higher. More spectators arrived. Someone had set up a betting pool near the saloon. The odds heavily favored the bronco. Red Cloud noticed Jack examining the saddle he'd brought from wherever he'd come from. The leather was dark with age and use. Silver conchos decorated the sides, but they were tarnished and dented. It was the saddle of a man who'd spent serious time on horseback. Doc Williams appeared at her elbow, medical bag in hand. "Hope you've got a preacher lined up, too," he said, "either for a wedding or a funeral." The crowd was growing restless. Someone called out asking when the show would start. Jack looked toward Red Cloud and raised his eyebrows in question. She nodded once. It was time. The consequences of the next few minutes would reshape both their lives. Red Cloud thought of Gray Fox's weathered face and the elders' disapproving frowns. She thought of Running Wolf's warnings and Mrs. Henderson's concerns about reputation. But mostly she thought about freedom, the kind that came with choices, even dangerous ones. Jack walked toward the bronco. The horse's ears flattened against its head. Its eyes rolled white with anticipation. Red Cloud's heart hammered against her ribs. In less than 2 minutes, she would know her fate. The crowd formed a tight circle around the makeshift arena. Jack approached the bronco with steady steps. The horse snorted and pawed at the dirt, sensing the tension in the air. Sheriff Collins held up his pocket watch. 1 minute on the clock, folks. No saddle horn grabbing, no rope assistance. Red Cloud positioned herself at the edge of the circle. Her palms felt damp, despite the dry desert air. The bronco was massive, easily 16 hands high with muscles that rippled under its dark coat. Jack ran his hand along the horse's neck. The animal flinched but didn't bolt. He spoke in low tones, words too quiet for the crowd to hear. The bronco's ears twitched forward slightly. "He's got a way with horses," someone muttered behind Red Cloud. She watched Jack's movements closely. His confidence hadn't wavered, but something had changed. The showmanship was gone. This was pure focus. The saddle went on smoothly. The bronco shifted but allowed the cinch to be tightened. Jack checked the stirrups twice, then stepped back and flexed his shoulders. "Ready when you are," Sheriff Collins called out. Jack grabbed the saddle horn and swung up in one fluid motion. For a heartbeat, horse and rider stood perfectly still. Then the world exploded. The bronco launched skyward, twisting its body like a corkscrew. Jack's hat flew off immediately. His left hand gripped the reins while his right arm windmilled for balance. The crowd roared. Dust clouds billowed around the arena. Red Cloud found herself holding her breath. The bronco landed hard and immediately bucked again, this time kicking its back legs toward the sky. Jack stayed centered, moving with the horse's rhythm instead of fighting against it. 20 seconds! Collins shouted over the noise. The horse spun in a tight circle, trying to unseat its rider through dizzying turns. Jack leaned into the spin, his body low against the saddle. His face showed intense concentration but no panic. Red Cloud noticed his leg position. He wasn't just gripping with his knees. His entire lower body worked with the horse's movement, absorbing the shock of each violent buck. The bronco tried a different tactic. It charged straight toward the fence, intending to scrape Jack off against the wooden rails. At the last second, Jack shifted his weight. The horse veered away, missing the fence by inches. 30 seconds. Sweat streaked down Jack's face. His shirt was already soaked through. But he remained seated, somehow anticipating each of the bronco's moves. The crowd's cheering intensified. Even those who'd bet against Jack were impressed by his skill. Red Cloud found herself leaning forward, caught up in the spectacle despite herself. The bronco reared up on its hind legs, trying to fall backward and crush its rider. Jack immediately shifted forward, keeping the horse's balance point stable. The animal came down hard but couldn't complete the maneuver. 40 seconds. Something was wrong. Red Cloud could see it in the bronco's movements. The horse was favoring its left front leg. Each landing sent a slight tremor through its frame. Jack noticed it too. His grip on the reins loosened slightly, and he began working with the horse's natural movement instead of simply enduring it. The bronco attempted another spinning buck, but its injured leg betrayed it. The horse stumbled, listing dangerously to one side. In that moment, Jack could have easily been thrown. The bronco's weakness gave him an opening to dismount safely and claim victory. Instead, he did something unexpected. Jack shifted his weight to help the horse regain its balance. His free hand moved to the animal's neck, steadying it through the stumble. The bronco recovered its footing, but at the cost of precious energy. 50 seconds. The crowd was on its feet now. Red Cloud realized she was holding her breath. Jack's actions made no sense from a competitive standpoint. He was helping the very animal trying to throw him. The bronco made one last desperate attempt. It launched into a series of rapid bucks, each one less powerful than the last. Its injured leg was clearly causing pain. Jack rode them out with increasing ease. His movements had become almost graceful, working in harmony with the struggling horse. 55 seconds. Red Cloud's heart pounded. 5 more seconds and her life would change forever. Part of her wanted to call out, to stop this madness before it reached its conclusion. But she remained silent. The bronco's bucks became half-hearted. The fight was leaving it. Jack maintained his seat easily now, one hand stroking the horse's neck in a calming gesture. 1 minute. The crowd erupted. Jack had done it. He'd lasted the full minute and then some. But he didn't dismount immediately. Instead, he continued riding the now quiet bronco around the arena. The horse's breathing was labored, and it limped slightly on the injured leg. Jack brought the animal to a gentle stop near where Red Cloud stood. He swung down from the saddle with the same fluid motion he'd used to mount. His first action wasn't to acknowledge the cheering crowd or claim his victory. Instead, he examined the bronco's injured leg, running careful hands along the swollen joint. "This horse needs rest," he said to Sheriff Collins. "That front leg's been bothering it for a while." The crowd began to disperse, buzzing with excitement about what they'd witnessed. Red Cloud stood frozen in place, staring at Jack as he continued tending to the injured animal. She'd expected arrogance, boasting, victory celebration. Instead, she saw compassion. The crowd pressed closer as Jack continued examining the bronco's leg. Red Cloud watched his gentle movements, noting how the agitated horse gradually calmed under his touch. This wasn't the same man who'd been boasting in the saloon. "Where did you learn to ride like that?" Sheriff Collins asked. Jack straightened, brushing dust from his hands. "My grandfather raised horses back in Kentucky. Taught me that fighting an animal only makes both of you suffer." Red Cloud stepped forward. The bronco turned its head toward her, nostrils flaring as it caught her scent. She'd always had a way with horses, something her father had noticed when she was barely old enough to walk. "This one's been hurt before," she said, running her palm along the horse's neck. "Someone tried to break him with force." Jack nodded. "Old injury, healed wrong. That's why he fights so hard." The parallel wasn't lost on Red Cloud. She thought of her own battles, the way she'd learned to fight against expectations and limitations. The bronco's resistance came from pain, not meanness. "I was 7 when raiders attacked our winter camp," she said quietly. "My pony threw me trying to escape the gunfire. Broke my arm in 2 places." Jack's eyes found hers. "Did you stop riding?" "My father put me back on a horse the day the splint came off. Said fear would cripple me worse than any broken bone." The memory was sharp and clear, her father's weathered hand steadying her as she climbed onto the gentlest mare in their herd. Her tears of terror mixing with determination, the moment she realized the horse was as frightened as she was. "Smart man," Jack said. Red Cloud watched him fashion a makeshift lead rope from his belt. His movements were economical, practiced. These were the hands of someone who'd spent years working with difficult animals. "There was a stallion back home," Jack continued, his voice taking on a distant quality. "Black as midnight and mean as a rattlesnake. Everyone said he was worthless, too wild to break." He led the limping bronco toward the water trough. The crowd had mostly dispersed, but a few stragglers remained to watch. "What happened to him?" Red Cloud asked. "Turned out he wasn't mean, just scared. Someone had beaten him with a whip until he trusted no one." Jack's jaw tightened. "Took me 3 months to earn his confidence, another 6 to teach him that not all humans meant pain." Red Cloud heard something in his voice, understanding born from experience. She wondered what had taught Jack Monroe about fear and trust. "That stallion saved my life," Jack said. "Confederate cavalry caught me carrying messages for the Underground Railroad. Their horses were fresh. Mine was exhausted." The words hit Red Cloud like a physical blow. She studied Jack's profile as he helped the bronco drink. Most white men in these parts had opinions about slavery. Few had risked their lives to oppose it. "The stallion ran 20 miles through enemy territory," Jack continued. "Bullets flying, dogs baying behind us. He could have thrown me and run free. Instead, he carried me to safety." Red Cloud thought of her own acts of rebellion. The time she'd hidden 3 escaped slaves in the desert caves, guiding them north while bounty hunters combed the territory. The risk had been enormous, but some things mattered more than safety. "What happened to the stallion?" "Died of exhaustion 2 days later. Gave everything he had to keep me alive." Jack's hand stilled on the bronco's neck. Red Cloud saw grief flicker across his features. Old pain, carefully buried but never forgotten. She understood that kind of loss. Her father had died protecting their camp from raiders. Her mother had followed 6 months later, unable to live with the grief. Some wounds never fully healed. "Is that why you accepted my challenge?" she asked. "Because you recognized something in this horse?" Jack turned to face her fully. His blue eyes held depths she hadn't noticed before. "I recognized something in you." The honesty in his voice caught her off guard. Red Cloud had expected charm or clever words. Instead, she heard simple truth. "You're fighting," Jack said. "Just like that stallion, just like this bronco. Something's got you cornered, and you're looking for a way out." Red Cloud's breath caught. How had this stranger seen what her own people missed? The desperation behind her bold challenge, the way she'd been backed into an impossible choice. "The tribal elders," she said quietly. "Marriage or exile. Those are my options. And you figured a failed bet would solve your problem. I figured you'd last 30 seconds and leave town embarrassed." Jack smiled, the first genuine expression she'd seen from him. "Sorry to disappoint you." The Bronco had finished drinking. It stood quietly between them, no longer the wild, dangerous animal from the arena. In Jack's care, it had become something different, calmer, more trusting. "My grandfather used to say that broken things can be the strongest," Jack said, "if they're mended right." Red Cloud looked at the horse, then at Jack, then back at the horse. The Bronco bore scars from its past abuse, but it had survived. More than survived. In the right hands, it might even thrive again. She thought about her own scars, the losses that had shaped her, the walls she'd built to protect herself from further pain. Maybe Jack Monroe understood those walls better than most. Maybe that's why she was beginning to trust him. The sun reached its peak as the last spectators drifted away from the arena. Red Cloud stood beside the water trough, watching Jack tend to the Bronco's injured leg. The reality of what had just happened was beginning to sink in. She was supposed to marry this man. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, she felt an odd sense of curiosity. Jack Monroe wasn't what she'd expected when she'd issued her reckless challenge. Sheriff Collins approached with his hat in his hands. "Miss Red Cloud, I reckon we need to talk about arrangements. The preacher's available this afternoon if you want to get this settled." Red Cloud's stomach clenched. Everything was moving too fast. The challenge had been impulsive, born from desperation and anger. She hadn't thought beyond the moment of Jack's inevitable failure. "We need to discuss terms," she said carefully. Jack looked up from the Bronco's leg. "What kind of terms?" "This marriage. What it means. What we both expect from it." Collins cleared his throat uncomfortably. "I'll leave you two to sort that out. But the whole town's watching now. People will expect a proper ceremony." After the sheriff left, Red Cloud found herself alone with Jack and the injured horse. The silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken questions and uncertain possibilities. "You don't have to go through with this," Jack said quietly. "I know you made the bet expecting to win." Red Cloud stared at him. "You lasted more than a minute. The terms were clear." "Terms can be changed." The words hung in the desert air. Red Cloud felt something shift inside her chest. Relief, maybe, or disappointment. She couldn't tell which. "Why would you do that?" she asked. Jack straightened, wiping his hands on his pants. "Because forcing someone into marriage isn't much different from breaking a horse with a whip. It might work, but it destroys something important in the process." Red Cloud thought of Gray Fox and his other wives, women who'd learned to be quiet and obedient, women who'd forgotten they'd once had dreams of their own. "The elders won't accept that," she said. "They'll still demand I marry someone." "Then marry someone you choose, not someone you lost a bet to." The offer was generous, more generous than Red Cloud had any right to expect. But it didn't solve her real problem. Marriage to Gray Fox still waited if she refused Jack's proposal. She studied Jack's face, looking for hidden motives. Men always wanted something. Her father had taught her that lesson early. Even kindness usually came with a price. "What do you get out of walking away?" she asked. Jack was quiet for a long moment. He stroked the Bronco's neck while he considered his answer. "Freedom, I suppose, same as you." "You're already free." "Am I?" The question caught Red Cloud off guard. She'd assumed Jack Monroe was like every other drifter who passed through Dusty Ridge, rootless by choice, answerable to no one. "Those men who rode through yesterday," Jack said, "they weren't just passing through. They were looking for someone." Red Cloud's blood chilled. She'd noticed the strangers too, hard men with calculating eyes and well-used weapons, the kind who made their living hunting other people. "Looking for you?" Jack nodded. "I've been running for 2 years now, ever since I helped that family escape north. Some debts follow you no matter how far you travel." Red Cloud understood. The Underground Railroad had made enemies of powerful people, Men who didn't forgive interference with their property, even when that property was human. So you need a reason to stay, she said. Something that looks permanent. A wife would certainly qualify. The honesty was refreshing. At least Jack wasn't pretending their arrangement would be based on love or even attraction. It was a practical solution to practical problems. What would you expect from a wife? Red Cloud asked. Respect, honesty, maybe friendship if we're lucky. And what would I get from a husband? Protection, freedom to live as you choose, a partnership instead of ownership. Red Cloud considered his words. The offer was better than anything Gray Fox would provide, better than exile too, which was her only other option. There would have to be conditions, she said, such as, I keep my own name, my own horse, my own money from trading. Jack nodded. Agreed. I choose when and if we share a bed. A slight flush colored Jack's neck, but he met her eyes steadily. That's your right as a wife, not mine to demand. Red Cloud felt some of her tension ease. This conversation was nothing like the negotiations she'd endured with Gray Fox. Jack was treating her as an equal partner, not acquired property. And if those men catch up with you, she asked, then you'll be a widow, not a wife. Either way, you'll have more choices than you do now. The brutally honest answer should have frightened her. Instead, Red Cloud found it oddly comforting. Jack wasn't making promises he might not be able to keep. She looked at the bronco, now standing calmly between them. The horse had learned to trust again, despite its painful past. Maybe trust was possible for people too. All right, she said. We'll marry, but as partners, not master and property. Jack extended his hand. Partners. Red Cloud shook it, sealing their unlikely agreement. The handshake felt more binding than any ceremony could. In the distance, church bells began to ring. The town would expect a wedding before sundown. Red Cloud found herself wondering if she was making the biggest mistake of her life, or the smartest decision. The church bells echoed across Dusty Ridge as Red Cloud prepared for her wedding. Martha Henderson had insisted on lending her a proper dress, despite Red Cloud's preference for her traditional Apache clothing. The compromise was a simple white gown with beadwork Red Cloud had sewn herself. Running Wolf stood in the doorway of the small room behind the church, his expression unreadable. You can still change your mind, he said. Red Cloud adjusted the beaded belt around her waist. The agreement is made. Agreement, not love. She turned to face her brother. Love is a luxury I cannot afford. This marriage gives me choices Gray Fox never would. Running Wolf was quiet for a moment. Outside, they could hear townspeople gathering for the ceremony. Word had spread quickly through both the Apache camp and the settlement. Father would have wanted you to be happy, he said finally. Father would have wanted me to be free. The distinction mattered. Red Cloud had watched too many women mistake possession for love, submission for happiness. Her arrangement with Jack offered something different. Respect, at minimum. Perhaps more, if they were fortunate. A soft knock interrupted their conversation. Jack stood in the doorway, transformed by a clean shirt and pressed trousers. His hair was still damp from washing, and he'd traded his worn boots for polished leather ones. The preacher's ready, he said, but there's something you should know first. Red Cloud's stomach tightened. The bounty hunters? Jack shook his head. The Apache elders. They're here. Through the window, Red Cloud could see the tribal council arranged in a semicircle near the church steps. Gray Fox stood among them, his weathered face set in disapproval. Chief Running Bear, her father's old friend, waited with ceremonial patience. They want to speak with you, Jack said. Both of us. Red Cloud straightened her shoulders. She'd known this moment would come. The elders wouldn't let her marry outside the tribe without voicing their objections. They walked together toward the waiting council. The townspeople fell silent as the two groups faced each other. Sheriff Collins positioned himself diplomatically between the potential conflict zones. Chief Running Bear stepped forward. His lined face showed the weight of difficult decisions. Red Cloud, daughter of Storm Eagle, you bring dishonor to your father's memory. The words cut deep, But Red Cloud kept her expression calm. I bring survival to his bloodline. Gray Fox offers you a place among your people. This stranger offers you exile. Red Cloud glanced at Gray Fox. His two wives stood behind him, eyes downcast and silent. They'd been beautiful once. Now they seemed diminished, worn down by years of grateful subservience. Gray Fox offers me slavery, she said clearly. Jack Monroe offers me partnership. Gray Fox's jaw tightened. You shame yourself with foolish pride. I honor myself with honest choice. The crowd stirred uneasily. This public rejection of Apache traditions could have serious consequences for Red Cloud's remaining family members. Jack stepped closer to her side. Chief Running Bear, I ask permission to speak. The old chief studied Jack with sharp eyes. After a moment, he nodded. Your daughter faced an impossible situation, Jack said. Marry against her will or lose her home. She found a third option. That shows wisdom, not dishonor. You know nothing of our ways, white man. I know courage when I see it. Red Cloud has more than most men. Chief Running Bear's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Grudging respect, perhaps. And what do you offer her? The chief asked. Freedom to be who she is, not who others expect her to become. The answer was simple but profound. Red Cloud felt something warm unfold in her chest. Jack understood what mattered most to her. Gray Fox stepped forward, his patience exhausted. Enough talk. The woman belongs with her people. The woman belongs to herself, Red Cloud said firmly. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the wind seemed to pause, waiting for the resolution. Chief Running Bear raised his hand. The choice is made. We cannot force what the heart rejects. Gray Fox's face darkened, but he didn't argue further. The chief's word was final. Preacher Williams cleared his throat nervously. Shall we proceed with the ceremony? The wedding was brief, but genuine. Jack's vows promised respect and partnership. Red Cloud's promised loyalty and honesty. When they kissed to seal their union, it was chaste but not without warmth. As the crowd dispersed, Chief Running Bear approached the newlyweds. You are both brave and foolish, he said. Perhaps that is what survival requires now. He placed a worn silver bracelet on Red Cloud's wrist, her father's wedding gift to her mother, kept safe through years of uncertainty. Storm Eagle would be proud, the chief said quietly, then walked away. Red Cloud touched the bracelet, feeling the weight of family blessing and ancestral approval. Jack took her hand. No regrets? She looked around at the dispersing crowd, at Running Wolf's cautious smile, at the infinite desert stretching toward the horizon. Ask me again in a year. They mounted their horses and rode toward the sunset, two broken people choosing to heal together. Behind them, Dusty Ridge settled into evening calm. Ahead lay uncertainty, danger, and the possibility of something better than either had dared hope for. The bronco limped alongside them, no longer wild, but not yet tame. Like their marriage, it would need time and patience to reach its full potential. And that is all to the story, for now. Please let me know where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will create a story there. Consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. And if you enjoy our content, click this video on your screen. I promise you, it's worth watching. See you tomorrow.